My only piece of advice with regards to this situation is one, pick your poison. If you think of that as a singular, not plural. So without a doubt, in our household, we tend to eat out a lot. My wife with our two kids, 7 and 3.5, will just look at me like there's zero chance we're cooking. I'm like, okay, we're going out to eat. It's where people get in trouble is the multiplier effect. So if you're a coffee every morning at $4 or $5, all right, that's the one you like. Then you want to try and limit the other ones. It's where it's across the board. It's the guy who has the drinking habit, eats out, has the all the gambling sites on his phone, which I find horrendous. Um, these are such stealers that when I go back and I look people's what they're spending on and these categories where they're putting in 2% to their 401k because they say that's all they can do, and we'll call the little bit more of the sin realities that we have laid out here, adding up to 25% of their budget. This is where the youth gets in trouble a lot. Um, and to amplify it, the what used to be the average age to buy a home was 29, where you had a forced savings account as you're paying at a mortgage. Now it's 39. So the youth are a little bit more renters, which is not building up equity. They're putting in 3% to get the match in the 401k, and then all their extra, instead of saving it, it's really easy. America's done a fantastic job of taking a few bucks here, a few bucks there, subscriptions here. So being conscientious of these items um, is absolutely crucial. Getting to the point where what I always kind of recommend too is a fixed number around it. If you're a gambler, put a number on it. I'm over the course of a year, I have this to carve out, and if I get to that limit, boom, I'm done. Um, but you just want to be conscientious what we're spending in these categories. Now, this slide is going to kind of shape up the rest of the conversation. So on our left here you may remember this was about 5 years ago. A janitor had left what I believe was $8 million behind to charity when he passed away. Now, this was someone who never earned more than 45,000, had a very simple process. He just had a handful of stocks that he just owned, left alone, and systematically bought over the years. So, a great line in the investment world, and where a lot of people that have a lot of wealth get wrong, is you do not get points for complexity. All these hedge funds and private equity and private credit, and all these crazy managed future, all these different strategies, a lot of them, when you factor in costs, aren't really worth it. Here's this individual who never really made any money, was able to squirrel just a little bit away consistently over time, let stocks do its thing, produce $8 million. Rather incredible story. Now, kind of the exact opposite would be the individual on the other side of the screen, Mr. Warren Buffett. So, Warren, now everyone would say he's the greatest investor in the world, and you probably wouldn't be wrong. Now, I would also say that if Warren Buffett retired at 65, no one in this webinar today would know who he was. There are hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of investors that do an extremely good job and retire at 55, retire at 65, and built up a nice, beautiful nest egg, but don't really stand out. Incredibly, at the bottom of the slide here, Warren Buffett, out of his, and at the time of the book came out, at an $84.5 billion net worth, of which 81 and a half, almost all of it, was created after he turned 65 years old. This is my point. If Warren had retired at a normal age, yes, he would be a successful billionaire, but not nearly the crown prince or king of the investment world that we know him today. So, what's the difference between Warren Buffett and everyone else? Warren bought his first stock when he was 12 years old, and I believe right now he's 94. So, the magic secret sauce for Warren Buffett is not how well he did in the markets, is how much time he was in the markets. When you have 3 extra decades at your disposal, that is an unbelievable tool in terms of compound interest. So something I consistently do over time is, especially when I sit with someone young, say, oh, you're 25 years old. Let's think of the power of compound interest. All right, if we put away 10 grand away, and there's what's called the rule of 72, that means if we earn roughly 7% and you divide that into 72, that means you're going to double your money every 10 years. So if we are 25 years old, putting 10,000 away, that 10 is going to go to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 80, 80 to 160,000. So I try and tell my 25-year-old, say, look, if we put away 10 grand, you don't have to do any bit of work. The market's going to do the whole thing and you're going to have 160 grand. And what made Warren so incredible is he had 3 extra decades at his disposal. So that 160 turned into 320 to 640, and now 1.2 million and change. Hence, his incredible amount of net worth is really that last third of he was investing his money. Still an incredible story. But to recap, just discipline and time and let compound interest do the rest is rather incredible. Now, of course, these are concepts we've all heard. I just never quite heard it to the point, especially with Warren Buffett's example of, that last 20, 30 years. So one of the things I always want to have hit home for individuals is, the different parts when it comes to retirement planning. So, for example, we have to think and worry about what's in our control versus what's not in our control. So, what is in our control? Like we were mentioning before, taking away the stupid things, understanding what we save and what we spend, especially when you're in your 20s and 30s and your early 40s, that means everything. So, for example, if you're 30 years old and you got 10 grand in the market, well, if you were able to save $1,000, well, $1,000 into 10 grand is 10%. You increased your net worth by 10% by just you saving $1,000. Now, flash forward 30 years from now, when you have 500,000 account, that same $1,000, it's not going to have any near the impact. So it's much more about what you're invested in as opposed to your savings rate. But control what you can control. So savings, especially when you're young, is everything when it comes to building your net worth. And the second thing is where we're putting our money. So are we putting our money that we're going to touch 40 years from now in the bank, earning 0.1 or 1%, or are we having it in a mix of stocks and bonds? So we certainly want to be conscientious about we're putting our money in the right homes. So money I might need in the next 3, 4 months, absolutely, sit it in the bank. Money I might need in the next year or two, or maybe we could just do kind of short-term bonds, low risk, but getting a little bit more interest. Money we need for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, the backbone of that portion of your net worth should be stocks and bonds. So that's taking care of the things in your control, being disciplined in terms of the stocks and bonds allocation, as well as the what you're saving. Now, sadly, the area that people get kind of tied up in and kind of lose their own personal self-control is market returns. Now I understand it, especially as I look at some of the people on this call today, if you have 2, 3, 4, $5 million and markets move your portfolio 10% in a month, well, $5 million, holy crap, that's $500,000 just moved in a matter of weeks. I get it. I completely understand. But you have to look at it and almost just have an understanding that markets are going to have good years. They're going to have bad years. They're going to have years in between. Whether and you could be right up close to retirement, the year before, year after, it's relatively meaningless. Markets are going to go through cycles. You're going to have many, many bad years throughout your retirement. You're still going to be in stocks. So if we just have the understanding that they're going to be all types of markets, I'm going to experience all types of markets while I'm in my portfolio. And all we can do is one, we can't predict, we can only prepare. So it's just being positioned right to take advantage of them. So how do we position right? We have an emergency fund. How do we position right? Well, we're not always gung-ho 100% in stocks. How do we position right? Well, markets are cratering. Maybe we're doing Roth conversions. So we can take advantage of painful time. So, worrying, oh my God, the portfolio is down. It changed that to like, all right, the portfolio's down. How am I taking advantage of this? Kind of a little bit of making the lemonade out of lemons. The other thing here, I don't get quite as many panic people, is the tax and the benefits policies. Similar to how you think about the markets, let the markets play out. Let's analyze the situation. How do we take advantage of it? We are right now in the middle of a situation where the House has passed their bill. It's over into the Senate. This is a 1,100-page bill that's going to have a lot of ramifications for people's personal finance. Don't think about it. Don't worry about it. You could think about it, your own personal political beliefs. But when it becomes law, it becomes law. Then we analyze and we implement. When the markets go crazy, we analyze and we implement. So don't be concerned. Don't fret about it. It doesn't help you in any which way. I get it. Like I mentioned before, big, huge money's moving around, but it's just par for the course. We just want to prepare, and when things play out, take advantage of them. And again, some of these are for a little bit more of the younger individuals, but the number one thing you can do is focus on your ability to earn money. When I sit down with 20s and 30-year-olds, like, yeah, okay, fine, you picked up XYZ stock and you doubled it. Great. At your age, you doubled it and went from $1,000 in your pocket to 2,000. It's not going to move the needle. But thinking about a way to increase your earning power is the most powerful thing you can do in your 20s and 30s. And longevity, simple. Just plan for it. If it doesn't happen, that's life. But you can't be 92 and broke. You can't be 88 and broke. So again, whenever we're doing financial planning, we're kind of planning on the long end. This is a problem that a very healthy percentage of our clients, not our clients, of the general public, excuse me, just for 1 second. So one of the problems in our society, and I would say social media, without a doubt, amplifies this. And you might have, if you have kids, what is it? They're looking at their social media and they see an influencer, and this person's wearing this kind of shoe brand or this jewelry or this type of car. Our society does a phenomenal job of putting everything in your face that you would want to buy. And then all you see is your friends, and the only time they post is when they're on an amazing vacation or something really positive happened in their life. And so you have this feeling of, all right, if I make 50 grand, I'm going to spend every dollar the 50 grand. When they make 100 grand, this is where the people that make two, three, four, $500,000 are still blowing it because they're constantly moving the goalposts. They're constantly upgrading their lifestyle. So you have the broke people at every step of the game. Try and be conscientious of this. This goes back to that first janitor conversation of living within your means. Again, the example was he made 45 grand and he was sitting there and was able to leave $8 million behind. We don't have to leave $8 million behind, but you want to find your personal sweet spot. And again, I'm not saying if you make 200 grand, you live on the 50 grand budget, but call it a notch or two below. If you always stay a notch or two, you're still going up, you're still enjoying the ride up. But if you just stay a notch or two, you get to breathe so much easier. I can't tell you how many times I come across someone and then I got this credit card debt. Oh, I took a line of credit. Oh, my line of credit used to be 3% interest. Now it's 9% interest. And then you get backed into the corner if the markets move on you. So you just want to be conscientious of it. So this is a slide that everyone on this call has watched me go over. So what we're looking at here is the US stock market. So this is roughly the last 30 years. Some of the most incredible markets that this country has ever seen. So just to quickly go over a little bit of a history lesson, was 2000 was the beginning of the tech bubble. This was a period of time where stocks lost 50. Imagine you hired me, and then for the next 3 years, your account went down. There's not only pain in terms of how much, but there's pain in duration. A little bit of psychology is like, if you're going to feel pain, You want it to happen quick, rip off the Band-Aid, and then you're slowly starting a progress up. The slow, painful deaths are an amplifier of pain. So this was a 3-year period where the stock market got cut in half, just miserable across the board. Markets marched back up, and then 2008, we had the worst year since the Great Depression. It was the financial crisis. Stocks lost 57%. The whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. Governments, huge bailouts to figure this out. No one really knew where that was going to end up. Unbelievably scary. Flash forward, then we have 2000, COVID. So we completely shut off the economy, had the biggest drop in GDP since the Great Depression. And again, another situation where you couldn't see the bottom. You didn't know where the end was. And then in 2022 was a recap or a repeat of the 1970s where inflation was through the roof at 10%. Markets freaked out. Government was going to raise interest rates, thought we were going to go into recession and drop 25%. Another painful time. Well, what do we know? If we were putting ourselves in the shoes of that janitor who nothing complicated, nothing over the top, everything he understood, I'm going to buy 10 big, beautiful companies, consistently buy them. It didn't make a difference if you started investing in 2008, the top of the tech bubble, top of COVID, we're sitting close to all-time highs again. Right or wrong, good or bad, if you stay diversified and you just believe in markets over time, markets have come back to all-time highs 100% of the time in the last 150 years of US stock history. Individual stocks, maybe not. So if you're holding individual stocks, you can't keep that in the back of your head. There's been tens of thousands of stocks that have gone bankrupt. But the overall market continues. The overall market regroups, recalibrates, and has consistently gotten back to all-time highs. So we want the power of time. We need to stay calm. We need to stay disciplined, and markets will reward us over time. So I get all the time, oh, the tariffs, this time is different. The whole world's going to, maybe. And here we are, markets went down 20% and rallied back 20% within 2 months. Now, don't get me wrong, I think markets are a little bit expensive at this point, but they're always going to be either a little bit expensive, a little bit cheap, kind of bounce around. Really, earnings tend to go up 7-8% when you look back at history. That is the number one indicator of where the stock market's going. Earnings so far this year are holding up pretty good. Now, that doesn't mean we won't go into recession and won't have bad times and stuff we've never seen before. But like I just showed you over the last 25 years, tech bubble, financial crisis, COVID, and inflation at 10%. That's a dream team of pain. And yet, if you started at the very beginning of it all, even at the highest, you made a nice, healthy rate of return. Now, for those of you who say, yeah, Mike, I'm going to stay in the market. I know that. I just kind of close my eyes. I don't look at my statements and we're good. Hey, that's 90% of it. Nothing wrong with that. For the last 10% of you who say, going back to what I was saying before, where I can't avoid the pain, but I could certainly take advantage of it. So everyone on this call today has a mix of stocks to bonds. Think of your bonds or your cash or dry powder. So if you're normally 50-50 stocks to bonds, we can increase our stock exposure when stocks go on sale. Well, when do stocks tend to go on sale? Think of your own personal feelings of what played out in the last few months. When fear and anxiety crept in, it really creeps in for everyone else at the same time. So this is a beautiful slide. This is consumer confidence. So how people are feeling about the economy, how the stock market. And we can kind of see all the periods in time where people were the most afraid. A couple of times in the 70s, obviously the big ones, the 2008 financial crisis. 2022 was an unbelievable painful one because you had stock, going back just a few years ago. Think of everyone on this call. All right, I have stocks getting hit me in the face. I go to the gas station and gas is $5 a barrel or $5 a gallon. And then you go to the grocery store and everything's gone through the roof. So it was just pain from everywhere. So the psychology, which was rather incredible, was worse in 2022 than it was in 2008, the worst year since the Great Depression. But putting that aside, just a very simple fact, when everyone's afraid, and we look at 1 year out, from the point when everyone was the most fear, stocks have averaged 24% over the next year. This is simple. When stocks go on sale, because people are afraid, we want to buy stocks cheap. The famous Warren Buffett line, I want to be fearful when other people are greedy and greedy when other people are fearful. Um, easy to say, hard to do. Now, so far, in the last few slides, I was talking about the big shocks, the COVIDs, the financial crisis, the tech bubble. Now, the markets love to play with people as well. So they love giving head fakes. So these are periods of time where markets go down 5%, 10%, 15%. So this is where, a lot of times people, get eager to think markets have turned. A lot of times they turn and go up a little bit, turn and go back down a little bit. You gotta, the ability to tactically move in the 5-10% realities, it's noise. Don't even think you can do it. No one could do that part successfully. The bigger ones, yeah, fair enough. The 15, 20, 25, 30% declines. But what's rather incredible, you know, more often than not, about 70 to 75% of the time, every time markets have had a 5, 10, 15% pullback, they finish positive in a given year. So again, most of the people on the call I don't get these calls from you, but there are plenty of people every time market drops 5% or 10%. Is this something that's changed? No, it happens every single year. Statistically, you're going to have 2 drops a year that are close to 10%. It's just part of being it. So again, same with that janitor going back to the beginning. It's noise, it's not relevant. He goes on, does his thing, and leave it alone. Markets are going to recover. Coca-Cola is going to continue to sell Coke. Home Depot is going to continue to sell Shovel. The economy figures out a way to grow. Don't get caught in the little bit of noise. And why don't we want to get caught? This is an unbelievable slide. So what a financial planner should never compare investments to is gambling. But the difference here is you're the house. So imagine you're sitting at a blackjack table or playing roulette. What do they know? Well, let's say we're playing roulette and we put $50 down on red. Well, besides the 0 and double 0, you're close to a coin flip. Maybe you win, maybe you lose. So if you play one hand, roughly a 50-50 shot. But they know if you don't play one hand and you play 1,000 hands, because of that 0 and double 0, it's really like a 48 or 49% chance you win. And that extra 1-2% over time, you play enough hands, they're guaranteed to win. Same with the stock market. Over any one day, it's roughly a coin flip. But over 1 month, 6 months, 2 years, the longer you're in the market, the probability that you have a winning hand, aka your money went up, I think it's at 16 years. So at 16 years, it's at 100%. Now again, we don't even need to have 100%. What's incredible, over any 8-year rolling period, 97% of the time, you won. It was the right move. So you just have to understand. And don't get me wrong, if you need this money in the next 2, 3, 4 years, you certainly shouldn't have 100% of your money in stocks. But there is nothing, and I mean nothing, that competes with stocks if we're talking 10, 20, 30, 40 years. You could argue commercial real estate where you're getting some rental and appreciation of the property, but then you kind of have to be a landlord. So, but in terms of a passive vehicle where you're putting your money to work and that's it, and you're just letting it do its thing and you can go back to doing your work and focusing on what's important to you, that's an unbelievable way to compound your net worth. Now, this is actually the oldest slide in my deck book that I have. This goes back to, was it first quarter of 2008. So again, think of where we are as a country. It didn't happen yet, but we're just about to go into the 2008 financial crisis. So on the left here, this is the investment outlook for Goldman Sachs. Obviously one of the 5, 6 most important financial institutions, probably not even only in the country, in the world. And this was their quick sheet of what they think of where you should put your money. So again, the whole world is about to fall off and go into a horrendous stock market where everything's get cut in half. And this was their recommendations at the beginning of the year. So what do they say? Stocks versus bonds. We want to overweight the stock market. Should we overweight international or domestic? Um, and then should we increase our large cap exposure or small cap? Long story short, when it comes to the stock market and the bond market, every single thing that they predicted went wrong. So here's one of the best institutions in the world, and in the most important year to get it right, 2008, they got it wrong in every single category. So when you go and watch CNBC and you see some talking heads say, oh, in the next 6 months, you should do A, B, and C. And then wait 5 minutes and you'll have someone say the exact opposite. And both of them are smart individuals. A lot of that in the short term is noise. So you will never hear me say that, like, oh, in the next 6 months, markets are going to do X. Markets are crazy unpredictable in the short run. As I just showed you in the slide or two before, they're crazy predictable in the long run. So as much as possible, tune out the noise. And the people that can tune out the noise on the right side here, I'm just going to focus on one spot here. So here's our 1 year and 5 year rolling periods from 1950 to 2023. And so if we're in a diversified portfolio, which everyone on this call here is in, some mix of stocks to bonds, since 1950, you average 9%. Now, I don't think it's going to be that high over the next decade because stocks are at all-time highs, but still a meaningful rate of return. But you never had a 5 year rolling period where you lost money. So for our long-term money, we can get a good rate of return. And if we stay disciplined, we're going to be fine. Just an incredible slide. Mark had some technical difficulties earlier, but Mark, if you want to jump on and present this slide.
Yeah, so I actually just end up registering with my own personal email address because I couldn't figure it out. Not the most tech savvy, but we're here. We got it going. I find this slide really, really interesting, and it's just with the first line, you can understand why. Wealth is what you don't see. And what I like to think about is kind of like an individual in trying to start losing weight and exercising. You go to the gym, and there's two things that can happen after you finish your exercise. You go out to eat, and you say, hey, you know what? I deserve this. I'm going to treat myself to this cheat meal. And you definitely can say that because you worked hard. Or you have the other individual who exercises, leaves the gym, and says, you know what, I'm going to turn down that treat meal because I went to the gym. And that's really the difference here is you're going to have, you're going to progress towards your long-term goals if you make sure that you are actually doing the sacrifices necessary. Now, if you are increasing your salary over time, but your cost of living is going with it, you're going to just end up with more stuff and not being able to build wealth. So that's really what we want you to kind of conceptualize here is that you buy more stuff, you'll have stuff, not money.
I love that line. That's a good line.
Oh, this is also mine. So room for error, I like to think about it is say that you have a boss that is very, very strict in regards to being on time for work. It's vitally important that you're on time for work. And say that maybe it takes you on average 30 minutes to get to work. But we all know in New Jersey, drive on 2780, it's bound to happen. There's going to be a tractor accident, and it's going to be a lot longer than 30 minutes. If it's vitally important, you're going to leave room for error to make sure that you're going to accomplish your goal no matter what curveballs are thrown, what obstacles are in your way. If you think that retirement and saving for it and having a lifestyle that you want is vitally important, you're going to make sure that there's room for error. So no matter what happens, if all the circumstances end up being unfavorable, you still have a high degree of success. And that's what we want to do is we want to take out the risk and still maintain a high threshold of confidence that we will be successful.
Without a doubt. And so when we're doing, and this piggybacks to our planning approach, you may have heard me say the line of, some people are the glasses half full, some people look at the glasses half empty. Well, I'm a glass half empty type of guy, and I'm pretty sure the other half is poison. So when I run plans, I'm unbelievably petrified of being wrong, of my clients running out of money. So without a doubt, I leave a lot of cushion. I'm going to assume a low rate of return. I'm going to assume a little bit higher rate of inflation. I'm going to leave a little bit room for extra budget. Um, because black swan events, negative tail things happen more than they should. In the same way, when you do a major renovation, you start opening up walls, that 40,000 renovation turn into 50, 60, 70,000. It just happens. Um, we don't know what it's going to be, but something's going to play out. A big one always comes up is dental. Probably two, three times a year, dental insurance costs people 30 grand, 40 grand. It's just incredible. You have to leave some slack on the line.
Oh, this one's also mine. Yeah, an emergency fund. I actually like to use my baseball metaphor. This is the two strikes that you're allowed plus any amount of foul tips to the curveballs that God will throw you throughout life. This allows you to absorb the pitches that you don't want to utilize and be able to maximize your opportunities when it's presented. So basically what I'm trying to say is the emergency fund, these unforeseen and unfortunate costly events that can happen from time to time, this emergency fund is the buffer that allows for you to withstand the storm and not sacrifice your long-term goals, like reducing your contributions or changing your investments to pay for selling some of your investments to pay for that unforeseen and unfortunate event. Yeah.
Yeah, so to just take emergency fund a step further, you almost want to think of it like a Swiss Army knife. So as times get really bad in the markets, and let's say we're taking $1,000 a month out of our investments to maintain our lifestyle, I might recommend to someone, hey, we're going to reduce it to 900. I want you to take a little bit, $100 from your emergency fund to supplement your income because we want to let your investments rebound. So, emergency Swiss Army, it's kind of a utility pool of money is the way I'd conceptually think about it. This one is just a slide that we found interesting from the book, and it's a little bit more of a, yeah, I agree. I didn't really quite think about it, but it's like, when you put it on CNBC and someone says you're going to have big problems coming up because this is coming down the pipeline and we're not prepared for this, you pay attention. You believe that person's more credible, and probably they actually are. But if someone came on and said, yeah, everything's great, don't worry about it, market's going to go up over time, leave it alone, and I'll see you next week. You kind of interpret that person as a flake. It goes back to the janitor, and it's just like we have a tendency, it's probably built in our DNA for hundreds of thousands of years of, think about the problems and think about things that can go wrong, prepare to that line that's going to come around the corner. Um, yeah, things are going to go wrong, but things that tend to work out when it comes to markets, when it comes to stocks. It's as a personally pessimistic person, if you're constantly like, oh crap, I'm gonna put it all in under my mattress. Oh, this is gonna happen. I'm gonna put it on my mat. You're kind of doomed. So as someone who struggles with it in themselves, I will listen to all the pessimists because I have a tendency to do that because I want to find all the things that are wrong. But you know, you shouldn't. You got to try and not have it impact your decisions too much. This was an interesting slide. And for those of you who don't know this individual, similar to Warren Buffett, he's on the Mount Rushmore of the most influential people in finance in the last 100 years. So this is John, or what everyone called him as, Jack Bogle. Jack was the kind of one of the founders of Vanguard and kind of the founders of kind of the passive world that we invest in, kind of also the backbone of all the models we utilize. Uh, it's kind of funny as the most known passive investor in history. And what does his son do? Oh, he's a stock picker and he's an active manager and is the exact opposite. And of course, like a good father, Jack invests in his son's investments. Uh, the takeaway here is, we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to squirrel every dollar that comes in way perfectly, do anything. You know, Leave some money in an emergency fund, give yourself a little bit of cushion. Your core approach to everything should be spot on. But without a doubt, do I have clients who say, "Hey, Mike, can we take 2, 3% and have a little fun and do a little splash?" Yeah, I get it. Life is short, have a little slush fund. So, are you going to pick three stocks that I think are going to turn out to be the next Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple? No. But if it keeps you interested and keeps it fun, and there's other parts of life. Um, but yeah, I just found that interesting about when I heard about Jack's son like that. Going
Right.
back to, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike. I think I just assumed this was
So
my book.
there's the next three slides are part of the core of these are the things we got to get right. Now there's fringe characters and smaller parts that influence it, but these are your core. So the first one, and probably the one that is the most important to the individuals on this meeting is, all right, we got it. We're in retirement. We've done the long haul of accumulating this big, beautiful nest egg. Well, I sure as crap don't want to run out of money. What can I sustain from this pool of money to distribute on an annual basis or a monthly basis that I don't outlive it? This is just kind of going over different withdrawal rates. So if we started with $1 million, so we have a 4% withdrawal rate, 5% withdrawal rate, or 6% withdrawal rate. In our situations here, statistically, maybe your 6% withdrawal rate is going to last you 22 years. Let's call it 28 years for a 5% withdrawal rate, and 4% odds of running out of money are extremely low. So taking a disciplined quantity of money or a disciplined budget in retirement, eh, there's not a lot of wiggle room here. There's no like, and where people get themselves in trouble a lot, and I had two conversations today on this, is we have our disciplined budget, and then they go, well, my son had this happen, so I gave him about 8K because he needed it. Your money doesn't know what it's being spent on. It doesn't have a good reason, it doesn't have a bad reason. It doesn't care if it's vacation or a utility bill. It's spent. Now, is any one-off thing going to completely blow up your retirement? No. But if year after year, I'm having the same conversation where you're telling me, I just had this one thing, or this was one in a lifetime, you're going to have a problem. You're spending too much money. It's a simple equation. What's the pool of money? What are we taking out every year? And what percentage of that does that come out to? You can't really, there's no wiggle room in that equation. So that's kind of where I want to think about it.
There's nothing that really is a better illustration for starting early and versus the impact of starting early versus starting later. And if you look here, just if you want to use the one column for 80,000, and Mike, if you can highlight for age 25 and age 50, there's a massive difference between 7% of your income getting put away to maintain the lifestyle of around 80,000 in same lifestyle in retirement, than putting 1/3 of your income away every paycheck to, by age 65, maintain that same lifestyle. So 25 years earlier, you're only having to put a much smaller portion to accomplish the same goal, as opposed to starting much later, having to do 1/3 of your income to make the same goal be successful.
Yeah, this goes back to that first slide we went over with Warren Buffett and your money doubling every 10 years. There's just a really big difference. You forget about Warren Buffett's extra 3 decades. But that 10 grand, if I put it away at 25 versus 35, is the difference between it growing to 80 grand or 160 grand. Um, that's why we do pro bono, sitting down with kids or people in their 20s and 30s. We try and do courses like, it's unbelievable. Life's so much easier the earlier you start.
I mean, you can see it accelerate. Oh, go ahead. No, no. I like to think about this as the vehicles you're choosing to get you to your ultimate goal. But I use the metaphor of actually driving from New Jersey to California. If you're going to be at age 25 smart enough to save, but you're putting all of your savings into cash. It's like choosing to take a mountain bike to drive from New Jersey to California. There's 100% of confidence that you are not going to be successful in your goal if you're not going to put the savings to the right vehicle so it could work at the rate it needs to. Versus if that 25-year-old still saving the same amount, just investing in it in a properly allocated portfolio between stocks and bonds, you're going from $158,000 to $500,000, starting at the same time, putting away the same amount of money, but just putting it in the right place. And we want your money to work appropriately with the appropriate amount of risk so that we can efficiently accomplish your goals with, like I said in the past, in the previous slides, with a high degree of confidence.
Yeah, this is a very tough lesson for people to understand. There's two main risks that like people should think about. The risk of the stock market going down and the risk of running out of money. Stock market going down is painful, it's frustrating, it's scary, but if you stay disciplined, you're going to be fine. The real thing to be concerned about is inflation. Is the cost of goods going up so much that you're going to run out of money? That's the real risk. To just take Mark's analogy and make it a little different, I always give that example with, a Volvo and a tank. Think of cash like a tank. It's safe. It's money in the bank. Nothing's hard. Nothing could hurt it. That's a tank, but tank can go 10 miles an hour. So if we're going to California, you're going 10 miles an hour. You're safe, but it's going to take you forever to get to a meaningful sum of money. The Volvo is a diversified portfolio. You could get to go 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. It's still safe. We're not taking crazy risk, but we get some decent speed. So again, those three slides are your building blocks of personal finance. Be in the right asset class, stocks and bonds for the long run. Or you could throw real estate in there if you want to. Save at a good pace, withdraw it at a good pace. Those are the three main things. You do those things well, everything else is kind of noise. And this kind of ties everything together. Now, this is what we do in a nutshell. Now, if we're lucky, we get to deal with individuals that are in the gray, where we get to go to pure finance. Let's create the most efficient reality based on your goals, wishes, and resources. Now, it's not always the case that everyone's purely in that camp. So depending on the person, fear, anxiety, stress, FOMO, listening to what your neighbor said or your cousin says, these are things that makes our job harder. It's just that simple. They're understandable. I get it, and don't get me wrong. There's some scary stuff that plays out, but as much as possible, you want to try and contain the things in blue. This allows for the max reality and kind of in the gray boxes. I equate it to like, I think there's 4 secret sauces to be successful: drive, guts, IQ, and EQ. And I'm just going to touch upon the 2, and I use my own personal example of the second or definition. So IQ, just pure intelligence. But I know a lot of very intelligent people that, I'll hear them talk, and because they have so much fears, anxieties, and stuff they've been through and baggage, stuff comes out of their mouth. I'm like, I can't believe this person that, might get a 800 on their SAT score just came out and said these things. Think of that as like the filter to create your product. Sometimes people's filters all full of gook and frustration, and then again, just makes financial planning harder. But you want to try and keep a lot of those things in control as much as possible, and that's part of why we're here. So as I discussed at the very beginning, this is not one like where we're going to give you the Social Security answer or the long-term care answer. This was just a little bit of a fun one to just make you think about finance in a little bit different light than you may have in the past. We highly recommend picking up that book. It's not one that you have to religiously read from start to finish. You could read a chapter here, chapter there. And he's actually come out with a few other books since then, which are all very good. Uh, in saying that, if anyone has any questions, always feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. But thank you so much for joining. We definitely enjoy what we do, and thank you for the opportunity.